Merry Christmas, you radical capitalists. "2020 has been a rough year for a lot of us, and 2021 is not looking much better. It seems it might be time for Atlas to shrug. But in order to help us get through this dark winter, I have constructed a list of 5 objectivist topics that will help us survive and thrive. Starting with number 1, the mind-body dichotomy. The mind-body dichotomy is a problem that most of us will face probably at some time in our lives. In order to make it easy on myself, I kind of wrote down all the answers, so I'm just going to be scanning back and forth onto this piece of paper. But let's go through here. The mind-body dichotomy problem is something that most of us will face at one point or another. If you want to do further research into it, you can see Leonard Peikoff's lecture series, Understanding Objectivism. Philosophy versus Life, the first lecture, he discusses this in detail. We're going to cover it shortly, given a chart that he constructs in that video. The chart is divided into 3 rows and 2 columns. You can see the rows are the 3 types of our nature: our actions, our feelings, and our thoughts. And the columns are divided by the sides of the dichotomy, so mind or body. We can see that someone that holds their mind is capable, but their body, their actual attempt in reality, in society, to use their mind will result in failure, as they think that it is impossible to enact their ideas. This person believing that the moral and the practical are opposites is a tortured idealist. The man that believes the opposite, that ideas and morality are impractical, will be a pragmatist. The man that chooses control of his mind without regard to his body is a repressor, hiding the reality that in order to properly deal with his feelings, he must deal with his body too. The man that chooses to feel rather than control himself is an emotionalist. Finally, the one that most objectivists are familiar with, the mind-body dichotomy of thought. Those that reject the body and choose concepts without percepts get to a rationalist. A man that rejects the mind, the concepts for the body, the percepts, is an imperialist. Learning to identify your potential mind-body dichotomy issues will allow you to get a sense of what philosophical errors you might hold and how to correct them. For instance, when I was listening to Leonard Peikoff's Understanding Objectivism and he covered this chart, I realized that from time to time I fall under the tortured idealist category. I chose objective morality, but in a sense I don't believe my attempts will get me very far in this society. Like I got a pair of shoes with holes in them. I got a coat with some buttons missing. My keyboard for the last 2 years, it's been missing a bunch of keys. So it's like no matter how much I use my mind, it doesn't seem like you get much results. And so from time to time, I realized that I was a tortured idealist. So what would be the solution to this temporary sense that I get every so often? It's clear by the examination of the chart, it would be to gain a sense of bodily practicality. Perhaps exercise itself just is the answer, getting some sort of bodily result from doing exercise, muscle growth and just better health. And that way my mind and my body are coming together as one. So that might be one solution to that kind of thing. Find where you fall in the chart. If you fall in the chart, I'm sure from time to time people are going to fall in the chart. And then and try to see if you can correct it. But I think no matter where you might find yourself at times on this chart, your identification of where you fall and how to fix it comes from our second topic. The Benevolent Universe premise. The Benevolent Universe premise is a fundamental conviction that ideas matter, meaning knowledge matters, meaning truth matters, that one's mind matters. That's a quote from Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand talks about this topic in the essay The Inexplicable Personal Alchemy in the book The Return of the Primitive. Rand writes that the consequence of holding this conviction is the inability to believe in the power or the triumph of evil, no matter what corruption one observes in one's immediate background. Take this paperclip off. One is unable to accept it as normal, permanent, or metaphysically right. Let's just focus on that last term, that a man with this conviction cannot accept evil as metaphysically right, meaning that one cannot believe that this action is natural to the animal exhibiting it. When Rand writes about a bird that acts to break its wings or its beak, That is an example that is easy to see as metaphysically not right. We are less careful when it comes to man and the attempts he makes to break his mind or body. Since birds don't have volition, we can see self-destruction as unnatural. Clearly, the bird is sick or not normal. But since man has volition, we seem to believe that self-destruction is potentially normal. It's a psychological view that Freud typically held. Therefore, in order to fully understand this topic and why evil is doomed to fail, and that the moral and the practical are the same, requires the third topic, which is actually free will. Free will is one of those topics that Ayn Rand would have completed had she had time to finish her research in neurology and epistemology. So I don't have any particular chapters to recommend in the pursuit of this topic. However, pulling from two quotes, I do think there's something to go off of here. The first quote from the Objectivist Ethics in the book The Virtues of Selfishness. That which man's survival requires is set by his nature and is not open to his choice. What is open to his choice is only whether he will discover it or not, whether he will choose the right goals and values or not. The second quote from Peikoff's The Analytic-Synthetic Dichotomy in the book Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology. Quote, because man has free will, no human choice, no phenomenon which is a product of human choice is metaphysically necessary. In regard to any man-made fact, it is valid to claim that man has chosen thus, but it was not inherent in the nature of existence for him to have done so. He could have chosen otherwise. Choice, however, is not chance. Volition is not an exception to the law of causality. It is a type of causation. I said that the topic of free will is important in regard to understanding the topic of the benevolent universe premise. But why would I say this? What do I mean? What does Peikoff mean by volition as a type of causation? Metaphysically, man is capable of converting percepts into concepts. If man did not have physical brain regions that hold auditory words in one spot, and definitions in another, and shapes in a third, and had no region which physically integrates those regions together, then free will would never exist, or would ever be conceived. The nature of man's neurology is such that he can focus on an object and abstract out the quantitative measure of the object, and by giving it a mental concrete to attach it to, so that his mind can grasp something, the abstract attribute can be conceived. I.e., when playing fetch with my dog, we both perceive which stick is longer. Only one of us can state that one stick is longer in length. The dog perceives the difference but cannot conceive the similarity, which is length, a thing that does not exist as an object in and of itself. Metaphysically, length is something that is man-made. There is no entity length, and your ability to focus on two totally different objects and abstract out their lengths is your causal volition. The regions of the brain that operate when you are integrating percepts into concepts does not do this automatically. It's not like the sodium-potassium pump that takes in 3 sodiums, flips the pump, pumps them out, and then takes in 2 potassiums automatically. Rather, these regions have no metaphysical automatic switches, such that 3 ideas about X forces a switch which releases the 3 ideas into one idea about Y. Every integration in these brain regions require your attentive volitional focus. Therefore, in order to understand how to manage our volitional consciousness, we need the fourth topic, psychoepistemology. The topic of psychoepistemology is based on the methods of man's ideas, not the content of the ideas themselves. It is a form of psychology that studies the actions of the mind. Motivation is the form of psychology that studies man's content. The best lecture for this topic comes from Harry Binswanger's Psycho-epistemology 1 and Psycho-epistemology 2. By understanding psychoepistemology, you can get a grasp on how to approach thinking about new ideas, such that you are capable of easily integrating new ideas. One example would be the recognition of the limitations of the mind. Usually called in objectivist circles the crow, the brain can only retain approximately 5 to 8 objects, and therefore it would be an open violation of the crow and acting against your psychoepistemology to attempt to integrate 30 abstract ideas into one or more concepts. Learning the proper method of learning methods is a skill that will accelerate you in everything you do. It'll give you better control of your free will, which will give you a better sense of the benevolent universe premise, which will help prevent mind-body dichotomy. This leads us to the last topic, ultimate values. Quote, "An ultimate value is that final goal or end to which all lesser goals are the means, and it sets the standard by which all lesser goals are evaluated. ... Quote, "Metaphysically, life is the only phenomenon that is an end in itself, a value gained and kept by a constant process of action. Epistemologically, the concept of value is genetically dependent upon and derived from the antecedent concept of life. To speak of value as apart from life is worse than a contradiction in terms." So an ultimate value depends on the nature of the animal involved, and in the sense the term value has a metaphysical to epistemological shift for humans. As Rand says, value is genetically dependent upon life. So to an animal, this value is that which is good for life, despite all the other animals' inability to see it in such terms. To a human, this value is dependent on man's nature, on the fact that he does have volitional consciousness. An animal does not hold one's life as one's ultimate value, as it cannot hold any such convictions. However, it does act on it. It cannot empathetically hold another creature's life as its purpose. Man, however, is capable of such an act, and can act as his own destroyer for the sake of another, even if the other is just an imagined being in the man's mind. Man, therefore, cannot just do as the animals do in order to pursue his happiness. In order to hold one's life as one's ultimate value, requires a value that makes one's life worth living. For a human being, in order to have an ultimate value, you need something that makes life worth living. One needs the existential activity of pursuing rational goals by rational means in order to maintain one's life. That's also a quote from Rand. Pursuing that goal to the full extent of one's ability to reward that hero with pure happiness, meaning that pure sensation of non-contradictory joy. The identification of this ultimate value requires some understanding of the topic of psychoepistemology, free will, the benevolent universe premise, and the mind-body dichotomy. And in return of discovering your ultimate value, and discovering the value that makes your life worth living, this strengthens your benevolent universe premise. It prevents you from mind-body dichotomies, and will guide you to your rational goals. So let's end on a quote that sums this all up. Quote, "The new intellectual will discard the soul-body dichotomy. He will discard its irrational conflicts and contradictions, such as mind versus heart, thought versus action, reality versus desire, the practical versus the moral. He will be an integrated man, that is, a thinker who is a man of action. He will know that ideas divorced from consequent action are fraudulent, and that action divorced from ideas is suicidal. He will know that the conceptual level of psychoepistemology, the volitional level of reason and thought, is the basic necessity of man's survival, and his greatest moral virtue. He will know that men need philosophy for the purpose of living on earth." Merry Christmas. Well, that was my little Christmas essay for you. If you enjoyed that little Christmas present, don't forget to go to Patreon and give me my Christmas present. It's only fair.